So what's up?
Well, just living life, living the dream.
That's
hanging
a lie.
in there.
Total lie.
Have you ever heard people say that anytime someone says living the dream, that means they're probably actually not
being
doing
sarcastic,
good.
like they're not living the dream.
They're hating life.
But they're putting on a good face and trying to fake.
They're being a trooper.
I hate cliches so bad. Like, I avoid cliches at all costs because, like, once you start evoking the emotion of, like, a cliche, you just don't know what everybody's adding to your cliche. Like, glass houses, right? Everybody thinks they know the glass house cliche, and it might not be what you think.
I just recently saw a video about some of our most popular sayings and how they got started, and it's kind of interesting, just like there's a reason people say, different figures of speech, I guess. It got started somewhere, so, the cliches got started somewhere, I guess.
Total horseshit. Like, just avoid it like I do, and then you can exchange ideas. It's all about communication and having an understanding.
You think you avoid cliches?
Of course.
Okay.
Do you reject that?
I reject that. I think that anyone could go back and look at past unpopular opinions and probably see a handful of cliches.
Handful.
A handful.
Like, when you reject something, it means you try really hard not to do it. But sometimes it reveals itself and against your will.
Yeah, and typically when you use one, you're like, God dang it, I just did it again.
Exactly.
I hate
so it's not
myself.
about perfection. It's about avoiding the cliche.
And acknowledging when you slip up.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
I get it.
Because the appeal of this show is that you take something that is very unpopular, right? Mm-hmm. And so you're going to catch static no matter what you say about it. And that's sort of the point, is to push on the status quo, to get people to think, get people to maybe question their biases.
Get out of their
whatever.
comfort zone.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because that's when we're doing our job, is when we allow people to kind of open their mind into new territories. And there's imperfection baked into just about everything we talk about, and that's what makes it exciting.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's hard because when you get an election season and everybody is sort of like hyper-focused, we have a tendency to over-invest into one topic and territory because that's what everybody's interested in. And half the time, you and I can't participate because the things that the populace are invested in are mind-numbingly dumb. And so it's really tough to like talk about things that you really don't care about. But you and I, we have some overlap in the things that actually matter, and we push on those things.
I think so. And like you said, I like that I think we agree a lot, but we also sort of will have that devil's advocate take, where if one of us is sort of going off in one direction because we both agree, so it's kind of easy to do, we still sort of say, okay, but let's look at it this way. Let's look at it as how somebody would push back against this. Somebody else might look at it this way. And then we say, but here's why that's horseshit. And here's what we think.
And you shall be judged for that every time. And really, because I think people find comfort in the status quo. And, when somebody supports the narrative that you believe, then you're supportive of that. And when somebody says something that kind of puts that in peril, right? You reject it. And those are my favorite discussions, is when somebody... One of my favorite shows here on the at Youngstown Studio was somebody who was not necessarily adversarial, but they disagreed with everything from an ideological level. And so if I can have a liberal sit aside from me, and they're reasonable, great discussions happen because we fight. Like, that's the part of it. But they're also very reasonable, that if I levy something that cuts against the grain of what they believe in, we'll throw it out there and kind of discuss it. So every morning, my son and I, we sort of have like a really outlandish, like stuff that we can't even talk about, my son and I talk about.
Oh, gosh.
And so, but the point is to kind of push on what he believes, like get some conflict going, right? And it's always great because a teenager sort of doesn't carry the same kind of weight of like dug in their beliefs, and they're sort of freer to be able to say, here's what I think, and it might be emotional, but it's really what I think. Where adults kind of like take what they really believe and bury it in the ground, and they're a little afraid of what they believe in. And, you know, a radio host here in Youngstown for a decade has been saying, do not fear your tongue, right? And I listen to those words like every time that I kind of, you ever like go to social media and you post something and you delete it because you know that it's good. Yeah.
Yep.
So everybody has that.
Especially this time of year.
Yes, right.
Yes.
And every time I hit the delete button, I hear his voice saying, don't fear your own tongue. And even know that there are repercussions. There's hell to pay for sometimes saying what you believe. I think it's healthy for civilization in order to have, whether or not it's the minority opinion or it's, you know, somebody who just pushes on the status quo, rage against the machine, right? The machine's going to be evil and push against it just for the sake of pushing against it. I think a lot of value comes in from just questioning authority.
Absolutely. Would you say you and your son more so agree on things or disagree on things?
Well, I play that devil's advocate. So no matter what he says, I kind of like...
You're like, I'm going to fight it regardless.
For sure. Even if I don't believe it, I push on it to see if like he can really defend his position and if he's researched in it and whether or not it's very superficial where you just say a thing and can't defend it. And that I think that's an important life skill to be able to, you know, explain. It's very easy to take somebody that you follow and admire and just accept their beliefs as your own. And when pushed against it, you've got nothing to say other than, well, see, that person said kind of a thing.
Yeah. I mean, it's so odd when people put so much stake in what someone else says. If it's somebody they respect and admire and they want to sort of be on the side of, they could either fall into this trap of, well, whatever he or she says, that's me regardless. I'm not looking more into it. If they're cool with it, I'm cool with it too. But then you also see this sort of turn where they could respect and admire them for so long and for so many reasons. And then that person they respect and admire says one thing different than they believe. And they're like betrayed and turn against them and no more. And it's like, what? Why do we do that? Why do we put so much weight on the opinions of others instead of, like you said, like support your own thoughts and your own words, regardless of
I think the world's so complicated that nobody has time to research anything and to really come to their own conclusions. So we have to outsource how we feel about things based on people who we respect. And sort of like if they change gears and they go in a different direction, we almost feel betrayed because we bought into the narrative of somebody we outsourced to, and now we're wrong, and we feel, like I said, it's we feel like we're betrayed.
And it's not a good feeling to feel like you were wrong. So I think a lot of people, even when they start to sort of question something that they've believed for a long time, I think they almost want to just keep pushing to that belief and looking for evidence to support that belief instead of saying, oh my God, I could have just been wrong this whole time. You know, what about this? And start looking into that. But
that's the majority. Confirmation bias is where you will go to great lengths to sort of like support what you believed before, even if it's 100% to an objective observer that's 100% wrong.
Yeah.
You will still go down with that ship so that you don't have to come and say, I was wrong, right? We don't want to be judged for having bad intel or whatever because we did the lazy thing and we outsourced it to another person.
Yeah.
Now that person has to be perfect and 100%. The fallibility of human beings are that nobody is 100%. So, election season, probably going to be a shit show, right? All the way from now to the end.
Yeah.
And so as a contingency prepper, I have to be prepared to protect all things no matter what happens. So if it goes well, cool. Have you taken any preparations for civil unrest to protect you and yours?
I guess not. No.
Zero preparation.
The only thing, and this is minor, the only thing I have found that I tend to do is, with the exception of like our discussions here, I very much try to remain neutral around everyone. If someone's got like a very strong opinion to one side or the other, I don't completely agree. I don't completely disagree. I sort of just stay neutral so that when someone is up in arms with this hatred because they don't like the result, I feel like those people are just going to go after everyone that was like on the winning side, so to speak. And if, this might sound crazy, but I don't think it is. I have a feeling that a lot of people that are kind of up in arms about this election and fighting with people on social media almost want to prove the person they're arguing against wrong more than they even want their candidate to be elected. They don't want to have to say, oh, I hate Joe Schmo and his candidate won and that ticks me off. It's almost like I feel like people fear that more than anything, is their friends and family that they've been arguing with could possibly win, so to speak, over them. And so I have tried to make it so that I don't look like that person in anyone's eyes, if that makes sense.
Total social preparations, protecting your acceptance into the social group as a whole. But what about physical preparations and the breakdown of the civil society that you depend on to give you everything that you need?
There's just like anarchy and rioting and craziness.
Could be. Okay, so all of the elements of that happening.
God forbid.
A recent conversation with my son was about what would happen if you kind of knew that you had 30 days that an asteroid was coming towards Earth and it was going to be an extinction event. All right. So really, what would your preparation be? That, if it hits on your side of the planet, that you're just instantly dead. So there's no big deal, right? You're just going to be dead. Like there's nothing to prepare for. But if it happens on the other side of the planet, like you might get a good, 30 days of living before it visits you, and you have to survive for 30 days against all of the people who are now panicking and taking everything and whatever. And the example is that when everybody around you decides that all the rules that you follow are now off the table, you got a complete purge event.
Yeah.
How do you live out your last 30 days? Do you bow out because it's inevitable and you don't want to, do it? But that's a absurd example of what happens. But if you got 50% of the population, that if one candidate gets elected over the other one, that it is equal to an asteroid hurtling towards Earth, do you trust that those 50% of people are just going to be like, we'll get them next time? Or do they respond the same way that they would when they know life is over, all of the elements of civilization are gone, and it is free reign to act out however you would? So if you're trying to prepare for your neighbors and friends to disobey the rules that you are adhering to, what's that look like?
It looks like moving far, far away.
In the middle of the forest where other people are not, right?
Yeah.
So, and that's, preppers sort of get a lot of criticism because it's outlandish and you're preparing for something that's highly unlikely. But the preparers that do those things, if that should occur, are going to be your best friend when and if that stuff happens.
So I just have to befriend you, really.
Yeah, but you gotta like
bring something to
your
the table.
weight.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So you got to start thinking about maybe I don't have a pallet of rice in my basement, right?
Yeah.
But I'm going to want that rice, and I got to have something of good trade so that I don't die.
So what steps have you made?
You have no idea.
You're like, you can't even tell me because then
all of you who are not making preparation for the physical world, I have, right? and I will defend the investment that I have. Like, I don't want to use a cliche.
I'm just waiting for it to come out.
Yeah.
Like what? You defend it like what?
Worst case scenario, you sort of hypothetically roll that out and find out what it would be like on the day that civilization breaks down. And what will you do? Okay. What will you eat? What will you drink? Where will you live? Who will you be around? All of those considerations are something that's not likely to happen, but it only takes an hour conversation to figure out what you will do. So let me take the absurd level and take it down.
Okay.
Okay. So you're sitting in your kitchen right now and you're talking about if right now a fire broke out in my house, what would we do? Okay. And they're like, okay, well, these are the things that would really suck. So like, let's just say I'm on the second floor and a fire breaks out and I put a ladder that I can roll down out of the window. You've made a preparation for a hypothetical that you hope never happens, but the ladder is there and it's sitting there for 20 years without being needed. And so you can do the same thing with absurd things, like what would happen if you went to the grocery store and it had already been picked over and robbed and there's nothing there for you to buy at the grocery store. Where would you get your stuff, right? Well, Joe has a pallet of rice in his basement is going to become very valuable, and the person who's done nothing is going to be eating the pears that have been expired since 2010.
Do you actually have a pallet of rice in your
I
basement?
am not going to share that because in the future this might be used against me. But there are the survival things, like when you start thinking about the breakdown of society, whether or not like, you need stuff to eat. Like how would you eat? You need stuff to drink. How would you drink? You need a place that's going to, protect you from the elements and be able to defend yourself against those people who haven't prepared. Like their first objective, right, is to go out there and take the shit from people who have prepared, because you're not going to just be like, oh, my bad, I didn't prepare and I'm just going to die.
Yeah, right? Yeah.
You're going to be the marauders. They're going to take my shit and I got to defend against it.
I'm going to ask nicely first.
What do you think you have to trade for my rice? I got a pallet of rice sitting there and you have no food, and I'm going to say, hey, just go eat grass. And what are you going to say? I will trade you X for your rice.
I don't have anything.
You're dead. Sorry. That is the advantage to preparing for things that haven't occurred yet, is that I have the ladder when fire breaks out and you are really sad because you have no ladder. I'm sorry.
I keep thinking now all the things I have to do in the next week to prepare.
Well, okay, what's most likely? So let's just say your candidate doesn't win and you are freaking mad, and whoever that candidate is the end of democracy. So the stage has been set for what you think is going to happen is actually coming into reality. What does it look like? Is there food in the stores?
I feel like if I truly believed that if a potential candidate wins, it is the end of democracy. It is the end of our civilization as we know it. That people will absolutely go batshit crazy and this country would be dangerous to live in.
Yes.
I would leave this country.
You just go somewhere else.
Yeah, rather than make sure I've got a basement full of rice and make sure I've got water and make sure we've got weapons and make sure we can fight against people and make sure this and that. Would it not be easier to simply
go to Canada?
Yeah.
Right
go
across
somewhere
the border.
else.
Go to Canada. They're not pissed off right now. They don't care if democracy is ending in the United States.
Yeah. So I mean, if I truly believed it's going to be a literal war zone the day a winner is announced, then I would probably just leave the war zone.
That's preparation as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
Because if your go-to plan is just to evacuate, then my rice is safer because you're not around.
Yeah. We both win. You're safer. I'm safer.
Right.
Let the crazies kill each other, and then we can all come back and restart civilization over without a bunch of psychos.
I'll build the wall, and then you will be in Canada, and I'll say, enjoy your Justin Trudeau. And that's it. You're there. Is it cool? I mean, is it a good sacrifice?
How do I know I'd want to come back if the land's all destroyed and the people are all crazy?
Exactly.
You might be like, Kelin, I need to join you.
Can you bring me in
Canada?
Then I would have to have something to offer.
Yeah.
For you to say, I'm not going to vouch for you,
And it
Joe.
ain't going to be a pallet of rice either, because
No
I have
pallet
food
of
where I
rice.
went. Mm-hmm.
Interesting. What else is happening? Like, I'm so played out. I want this election to end, and that is the new cliche.
Yeah.
I'm so sick of it. I just want it to be over. Now, what happens, do you think, if we get to, like, Tuesday's the election, and Wednesday hasn't been decided, and Thursday hasn't been decided, and Friday hasn't been decided? Do you think we up our chances for that social breakdown the longer this thing lasts?
Well, I've discovered something that I think could potentially be the unifier in all of this.
Ooh, I'm interested. Go.
The thing that is going to make everyone sort of come together. It could be our September 12th. And I think that...
Can I guess first before you...
Yeah.
Okay. I'm thinking it's probably not Beyonce.
No.
It's not Beyonce. Beyonce's
Beyonce.
not going to bring us together.
No. But it's a person.
Oh, is it?
Mm-hmm.
Ooh, I'm listening.
Let me explain. I think it's going to be Tony Hinchcliffe.
What?
Mm-hmm. I think we can all unite over our hatred for one person. Because who thought that was a good idea? I went back and I watched it after our last conversation. Here's the thing. Putting away any offensive material. It's just not funny. This wasn't funny. He's a comedian and he's just not funny. So I feel like we can all agree with that.
What if not? What if objectively some people died laughing from how funny that was?
I think that's going to be such a minute number that they can probably just have that moment. It wasn't funny. He offended some people, which whether or not you think what he said was offensive or not, I think that I do see a lot of people that were even very, very pro-Trump saying, dude, this was just not the right time. Like, this was bad. We're this close to the election. You really need more negative press. You really need someone that is getting so much flack. I just don't know anyone that thought it was great. You know, I shouldn't say anyone. There's onesie-twosies on the internet of people saying 100% he was awesome. I think they're just looking to start a fight. It just wasn't great. It just wasn't. And I think we could all agree with that and unite over that.
So is it the principle of having, like, off-color humor that is it? Or is it the, for instance, Biden called Trump supporters garbage, right? Is that equal to calling people of, or, people of a certain political suasion as garbage when it's pretty uniform between the two?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think you're going to find insults on both sides. And I think you're going to find instances that you can point out where this person did something mean, but this person did something equally as mean. So they're going to cancel each other out. They're both mean. But here is one thing, one person, one entity that...
Okay, so Biden saying Trump supporters are garbage. And then one other person saying the entity of Puerto Rico is garbage. What's different about it? One was trying to be funny. One was super serious.
You're talking about the difference between Biden saying it and this comedian saying it?
Yeah, the same nouns and verbs. We are calling a group of people garbage. One is the unifier that everybody can agree is so terrible that we want to do the whole admonishing thing. And one is under the protections of a political objective.
Well, Biden is kind of out of the game. So
that's why... how is Hinchcliffe part of any game?
Hinchcliffe is part of the game because he's still with the active participants.
So
Biden's not really an active participant in
so
this.
Biden's not part of the Harris campaign? He's not saying anything in support of Harris?
Does anyone take anything Biden says now?
A comedian? A comedian? Do I take anything a comedian would say is serious?
That's the thing. Is he is so far removed. He's not a politician. He's not a candidate. He's not someone running. He's an outsider of politics. So it's an easier thing to be like, let's all hate this guy. Why not? What has he done good? Could you argue he's done anything good?
Everybody listening to this can say exactly the same thing about two people. They send the same kind of off-color humor that tried to take a population of people and throw them under the bus, and they are on the fringe of support of a certain candidate, and their relevance is a little obscure in nature. So both are of equal thing. So if you throw Hinchcliffe under the bus as being the most terrible villain in the story, you can say the same about the Nazi garbage, whatever's coming out.
Oh, for sure. You can say it about everything. I mean, don't even get me started on the Nazi stuff. It's so ridiculous. But
it's mainstream, though. Like, it's accepted and tolerated, and nobody's pushing up against it.
But I feel like if we have this person that is willing to sort of absorb all of that, all of the negativity, and it's not going to change any, like a political realm or like the country. Like it's not like he's like vying for this powerful position. It's just this comedian that could go away tomorrow and nobody cares and nobody remembers. I could see media and the forces that be saying, let's make this it. Let's make this the unifier.
So Hinchcliffe's the martyr. He absorbs all of the negativity. And Joe Biden gets scot-free.
Joe Biden sort of also disappears.
The license of not having paid a consequence for idiocy. If you're going to do idiocy and it's a principle, then everybody who does idiotic things should pay the same consequence.
Listen, if everybody who did idiotic things paid a consequence, we don't have time for that. We don't like. There's.
So what are we talking about? Like, what are you suggesting then?
I'm suggesting. I don't want to even say this. It sounds terrible.
Do it.
Instead of focusing your hate on each other and candidates, everybody could focus it on one thing that unifies us.
So you martyr Hinchcliffe, and then it all goes away.
Yep.
That's dastardly.
Sorry, Tony Hinchcliffe. We're just gonna need someone.
But
Someone's gotta do it.
The rest of us, our justice meters are going to go up, and as long as all rules apply to everyone, and as long as everybody's treated fairly, then Hinchcliffe doesn't pay us consequence that the other people who are doing the same kind of things don't pay a consequence.
Yeah, you're never going to have people make sense. There's always going to be hypocrisy. There's always going to be somebody sees something wrong with one thing but not another, even though they're the same. You're never going to have everyone agreeing to be rational human beings and see things for what they are. So you almost have to manipulate the people to look at something a certain way in order to unify them.
I honestly think that if you did that, you would have 50%, but you would be no better because those 50% were the same separation that you had before the experiment. It's not like somebody's going to be like, oh, Joe said it and Tony said it. Those things are equal, and let's all get on the same team. The only thing that would happen is to say, hey, let's create a principle that says nobody does that kind of shit ever, right? Nobody takes shot at a group of people because you disagree with them. And then we're like, okay, well, either we're on that team where we take those people and punish them or not. So you're in the exact same place. You made no mathematical ground on that.
This is interesting you bring that up because I actually got into not even really a conversation. It was a couple comments on Facebook with someone that is actually trying to get signatures on a petition to make it illegal to participate in hate speech. Hate speech should be a crime that you can be arrested for.
Okay.
How do you feel about that?
Well, first question is, who's defining hate speech? Because if I
That was
say
my
that
question, too.
I hate Democrats as hate speech, then it's probably not. I have to trust the arbiter as much as I have to trust the actual rule.
Right, which was one of my questions. Is there's kind of some holes in this?
Who decides?
And I think he had said that in his definition of hate speech, it's anything that incites violence towards a particular group.
So if you said I hate zucchini, and I take offense that you hating zucchini, and I go murder a bunch of people, that means that you incited violence against people who love zucchini, and I will be charged with hate speech because you hate zucchini. It breaks down like that. That's what I'm saying. Like, if you do not have guiding principles, right? So if I say that I hate something that is hate speech, and you know what counters hate speech? More speech. By you saying that I'm an idiot for hating zucchini, and now you have leveled the playing field. As long as you have an arbiter that can kind of like cherry pick what's hate speech, and they can take and say, well, Tony Hinchcliffe, that's bad, but Joe Biden, that's acceptable, right? Then the rest of it is like, oh no arbiters here. It is a 1-for-1. If it's a thing, it's a thing, and then we'll accept it, right? Because you've deprived somebody being able to break the rules, right, against someone who can't break the rules, and that's not. Yeah,
you're banking on society never ever being hypocritical, and that's just not going to happen.
For sure. And that's why I prepare for the breakdown of civilization, because so many accepted contradictions and injustices that there are do not have a mathematical end other than, a tsunami of discontent. That's just, I mean, unless we all sat down, we said, let's have a meeting of 400 million people, a little less than 400 million people. We all get in a room and say, here's the rule book. Everybody agree. And not leave the room until everybody decides what is moral, what is ethic, what's a lie, all of these things. And we all agree what it is. And we all pledge that we're going to follow those same rules. If you can't do that, which, spoiler, you can't, right? Mm-hmm. You have to have free speech. You have to have consequences. You have to have punishments. And then sort of like a courtroom. You have a prosecutor who's trying to get someone to be guilty. And you have a defendant, right, and a defense attorney that is trying to get not guilty. Mm-hmm. And through the frictions of those two hammering out every detail that they can have, that you come to a middle ground between those two, right? Mm-hmm. You can't expect that if a prosecutor comes across evidence that exonerates whoever's on the stand, that they're going to be like, oh, I was freaking wrong. Cut it out, right? Because that's not his job. But it's if you have hate speech, then you have speech that's not hate speech. And the two of those frictions together, you come up with something that's halfway between those two things. Or else, it's just about who holds power. So if the wokeists are holding power right now, then you have an injustice against people who don't believe in wokeness. If you have Democrats in power, then the Republicans are out. If the Republicans in power, then the other ways out. So it's then just the accumulation of who gets to kiss the ring and who gets to wear the ring. And that has an inevitability of somebody power is going to centralize like it always does in every other department. And you're going to either be hopeful that you're on the side that has the ring being kissed, and you are going to not live for the day that your side is doing the ring kissing.
Yeah.
Buy your rice.
Buy your rice.
Buy your rice.
Listen, how are you going to cook rice if everything's just gone to hell?
If you can't cook rice and you can't figure out a way to survive on a pallet of rice for 30 days, right? Then there's no
30
hope for
days. But I'm thinking like end of the world extremes. Like you got nothing.
It's about, okay, you ever hear the cliche?
No, what cliche? Tell me. No cliche. Tell me what it is.
I'll just give you an example, right? So how about the example of you don't have to outrun the bear, you just have to outrun your friend, right? Okay. And so
it's not a cliche, it's an example.
I gave you an example.
Okay, we'll go with that.
Okay. So you don't have to outpace the other rice holders, right? You have to outpace the people who didn't do rice at all. So that's all you have to survive. So let's just say 25% of the country rice, water, shelter, ammunition, guns, right? Mm-hmm. Well, you don't have to survive other people that made those preparations. You have to survive Kelin, who has nothing in that scope to trade. I just have to survive you. I don't have to survive everybody else. As the competition weans itself out by succumbing to their lack of preparation, you survive, and I think 30 days should have that play out. I think everybody will have broken down to its pinnacle by 30 days. 30 days with the rice.
Or we could just avoid all of that by uniting our hatred towards one person.
But if Hinchcliffe is your savior, you are stuck.
Listen.
That is not going to be your savior.
September 12th. Why were we all united? I guess I should say, why was there a feeling that we were all united?
Because there was a common belief in when you are attacked, you come together against a common villain.
Right.
And you took 50.
Where I'm going with that.
You took a 50% person and made them a common villain. How many people, if you walked around the United States, would say, Osama bin Laden, is he a good dude or not? You're yet 50-50, or are you about 90-10?
Yeah, I mean, I think most people would agree.
So Hinchcliffe is not your savior because he's a 50-50 split, not a 90-10.
Do you believe that there's like a huge fan base for him out there?
Heck yeah.
I don't even know. He could be. I don't know. I'll be honest. I barely knew who this person was before this incident, which I think a lot of people might say the same. And even if not, let's say he was a beloved comedian that had clean, wholesome humor and everybody adored him, and then this happened. Why can't we still use him? Why can't we sacrifice him?
Because he's not villainous enough. There can be an argument made that he is a freaking comedian. And if you go historically, comedian's job is to push back against politically correct things.
And us normal, rational human beings like you and
50%.
I would say, this is just a comedian
50%.
trying to be outrageous. Matt Rife is another comedian that got a whole lot of flack and blowback
50%.
because he was trying to try out the dark humor. And then you have everyone that just immediately is offended and thinks it's horrific, and there's no excuse for it.
I'm trying to convince you that they're just not enough of those people who will superficially be so outraged that they will join the 90% in opposition of. You have 50% of the people who say, he's not really a villain. It's his job to push against the people who are so weak-spined that they can't take a joke about condemning an entity, whether it be Republicans or people of Puerto Rico, that it was so outlandish that they're so offended that we need to sacrifice this dude as a martyr.
Can you think of someone who is a big enough villain?
I don't. I can't. We're so tribal at this point, and stuff is so evenly split. I don't think you could say there are very many people that would just say, I mean, you could take even someone crazy like Kim Jong-un or Putin, right? What?
I know.
What?
Diddy.
Diddy?
Sean Diddy, Puffy, whatever Combs.
That's your martyr?
Big enough villain. Do you know anyone that wants to come to his rescue right now?
I don't think so.
I'm sorry, Tony. You're off the hook. You're good to go.
We just elected Diddy to...
Diddy, let's unite.
So the qualifications for being the martyr is 90% people behind. See, I don't think there's enough hatred for that. I really don't. And I think it's been diminished because the dude misbehaved, and he took minors along with them, like pedophiles. And I think there's been so much pedophilia in sort of like strata of power that I think we've eroded how, like we spent the last 2 years here taking things that were taboo as shit and making them mainstream, right?
Yeah.
You remember the dude that was trying to get minor attracted persons as something mainstream? You remember that?
Oh, yeah. Like they were just differently sort of brained, and so you shouldn't judge them. It's just how their brain works.
Exactly.
I think was the defense.
But we've done a lot of that.
Yeah.
We've taken things that the rest of us would have just completely kicked them out of society And we almost gave them a big hug and welcomed them in as something they couldn't help because that's just how they're wired. You're going to need a bigger villain. You're going to be.
If you've ever needed to strengthen your argument about doomsday prepping, it is the fact that we are so screwed up that we need a bigger villain
than a
pedophile, a rapist, a sex trafficker. Well, all right. Let's start with the rice pallets.
I'm telling you, and that's the end. No matter how many times I waterfall this through to find out if there's a big enough uniting person to either inspire us into uniting or set the example of what we do not want to be, we've embraced all of the things that would have a principle enough for us to say, oh, that's just freaking wrong.
Yeah.
And maybe just kind of talking this out, we haven't come to something that we can all agree on as something that is terrible and horrible. I agree with you that you went from Hinchcliffe to P. Diddy, and that is a bigger percentage jump upward.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
There's got to be something above Diddy.
Above Diddy.
Above Diddy. You have Putin sympathizers, you have North Korea sympathizers, you have, Iranian sympathizers. Like, where is the end when we can 100% agree that you go talk to the public and say, do you disagree with X? And 100% of them, no matter who you talk to, is a yes.
Like one unifying issue that everybody can agree on. I don't think that exists. Unless we create it. Just like the media does. Why can't we do it?
Create your villain. Now, do you think it's a little bit less effort to create your inspirer, someone who you like? You end up with Jesus, right? So if you inspire in spite of everybody being fallible human beings, then we at least have someone we put on a pedestal that says, let's aspire to be this instead of the other way, which is let's aspire to go into the toilet of humanity and be a P. Diddy, a Tony Hinchcliffe, a Pol Pot, go down the road of people who were terrible for history. I mean, I think that's the big sacrifice that we made, is that when we start invoking Hitler and calling a presidential candidate Hitler, we diminish what Hitler should do and how uniform it should be that we admonish and really know that Hitler was the worst that humanity ever, But when you do that, you're like, just like racism, the same thing. Like, it used to be, I called you a racist, right? That was a game ender for you.
Yeah.
Right? So we knew that if you were a racist, I don't want anything to do with you. I want to be standing next to you. We can unify against that. We don't want racism. And we're like, oh, racism, that's a power advantage. So if I just go to somebody I disagree with and call them racist, that I get that power advantage. And then we started calling people who weren't racist, got the power advantage. And then people were like, if everybody's racist, then nobody's racist. And we killed something that would have been unifying.
Yeah, we killed something that was meaningful to people.
Yeah.
And it's become a literal joke. Have you heard of the movie, Am I Racist?
Yeah.
That's out now. It's meant to be like a comedy.
Yep.
And unfortunately, anyone then that was ever put in a situation that racism was truly involved, it's now diminishing that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because you want those terms to mean something. Mm-hmm. And then you have to respect the fact that somebody who's not going to use or overuse or abuse it. And then complete industries crop up against the power that you can garner by accusing someone of racism or sexism or whatever you want to pull. And all of a sudden you look around and there's nothing that unifies someone in outrage enough, right? Because you've overplayed something that should have been meaningful. I think we did a huge disservice where we can't take something that Hinchcliffe, and honestly on a principle basis, reprehensible. Everything that he said was reprehensible. Even when comedians, do you remember that guy that used to play on, what was that show? He made a joke about racism and his career was frickin' ended.
He played Kramer.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I just saw an interview about this. It was Seinfeld.
Yeah, Seinfeld. That's it.
Michael something. Michael something is his name, I think.
So anyway, he's on stage. He's a comedian. He says something that cut against the grain of what he was the villain, right? Mm-hmm. And what happened to the villain? We taught him a lesson that that's not an acceptable thing. That's not entertainment. That's not what we want to see. And then it was a warning to anybody who would say and be in that vein of comedy. right?
Yeah.
And I love the fact that comedians push against things, but there's such thing as a too far. The problem is that all of the too far taboos were broken. And we made it acceptable to break through those taboos. And there's a consequence to that. It means that we're not offended by certain things. We should be offended by a lot of the things that pop culture has accepted, which diminish those terms.
Mm-hmm. And I've always said, too, I think intent is huge when it comes to things like comedians sort of pushing that boundary line. Like I mentioned before, Matt Rife does a lot of crowd work. A lot of people think that he takes it too far. He says things that sound pretty offensive. In no way, though, have I ever seen it in a mean way. To me, there's definitely a difference between just dark humor and saying, oh my gosh, if I say this, it's so wrong, but it's kind of funny. And then just saying it because you believe it because you are a bigot or a racist or whatever. So to me, intent behind it is a big thing. But
go watch comedy from the 80s. Go watch comedy even in the 90s. And there was still a line beyond, right, that was crossed on a regular basis. You'd never be able to get away with that today.
Yeah.
And I don't think in comparison to what Hinchcliffe said to what's said back then is out of line. And even like Hinchcliffe, obviously he's gotten media attention, so they went back through some of the things he said back in 2006 and 2010, right? Do you think he's any different now than he was then? No.
I actually never saw his material until now.
And I'll give you an example. He went on Twitter at the time, and he said, I think I'm going to go buy a slave. Anybody want to go halvesies, right? So pushing on against something to make people outraged, and that was his brand.
It's like an internet troll.
But he didn't, exactly. He didn't go down for the count. He wasn't made out to be a villain. He said something for the explicit purpose of getting someone upset about something that he said, and that was his comedic brand. If you ever watch Kill Tony, right? You ever watch any of those?
I heard of it once I found out who he was. I've never watched it, though.
It is 100% obscene. It is, 1980s flavor of comedy.
Kind of inappropriate jokes.
And that is the shtick, is that you're pushing against things that people are going to take offense to. You remember on Conan, there was the insult comic dog?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So those jokes were in terrible taste, and it made people inhale a little bit and hold their breath because they were completely uncomfortable. And that was comedy's job, is to make you uncomfortable in what they just said.
Look at every Comedy Central roast of anybody.
Yeah. And you as a reasonable person sitting in there and saying, man, if they were taking shots at me like that, how could I even sit there and not come to tears, right?
Yeah.
That's what comedy's job is. So if we don't want comedy to push against things, comedy gets stupid boring. It doesn't have any kind of cultural change. It doesn't push against your beliefs and take things too seriously. I don't think it solves problems, and I don't think it makes anything worse. It's just a person that on a regular basis is trying to make you uncomfortable with the words they say. And like we talked about with hate speech, right? Should I say something that you disagree with, the only repercussions for me is that you say something that puts me in check. More speech, not like saying, oh, well, Joe made me feel uncomfortable by what he said, he should be shut up. That is the opposite, because remember, the arbiters of shutting people up, it's just 22 seconds before somebody gets the role of being arbiter of what makes people feel uncomfortable, and then eventually that's gunned at you, and something you say you're shut up with. That is a slippery slope to go from being able to say it and deal with your own repercussions to someone having the power to make it so that you can't say a thing.
Yeah. And again, disclaimer with the Tony's, his jokes. It's not even that he was overly, or that he is an overly offensive comic. I just think personally, if I worked in political PR in any way, I'd say, let's not for this one.
Probably a very bad decision.
Let's not use him in this instance.
Okay, all right. Well, so next topic here. Do you think that it was orchestrated? Do you think that we took something that we had a defense against, and then we poisoned the news cycle so that if you had an October surprise ready to go, and now you have to put your attention on the Tony Hinchcliffe shit, now you're occupied and distracted from what you really wanted to say because this seems like a way bigger story?
Ooh. I mean, it would make sense, especially because if he's not going to be this unifier, if he's still going to be somebody that, again, is putting people at odds, it's driving supporters even further into supporting one person because they just want to fight the person that is claiming he was awful and offensive. Yeah, it's taking up news attention. It was so outlandish. How could you not talk about it?
Because it feels to me like it's bait. It's a trap,
like,
to go after. Like
the right maybe is not stupid. They knew exactly what they were doing.
And they robbed you of a news cycle talking about something that they polled ahead of time that was going to get a lot of energy, but be really flat on the long term and not alienate the people that are going to vote for you anyway. Totally could be. I don't believe anything happens as coincidence or off the cuff. I think it's completely orchestrated, and this was just part of the plan.
Like, we need something so big.
In one way. It's single-dimensional big, right?
Yeah.
Like, it only has one counter, right? And all it's going to do is stay in the headlines for a week.
Yep. Because, I mean, if you look at it, let's say Kamala did something great. It's not going to be a bigger news story than this guy.
The Hinchcliffe thing. So he took it. He was the sacrificial lamb.
He was the martyr.
He was the martyr, but in a completely different way. Purposeful. On purpose. Did it willingly.
Yeah.
Totally orchestrated. That's my thought.
And that's what I was saying is, Tony, we need you to go ahead and just volunteer to be this martyr to unite the country, when really it's like, hey, he's being the martyr, but not to unite us, just to make sure the one side wins.
It's kind of genius because his style of jokes didn't deviate from what he's used to. They didn't take a comic that was straight up. They took a person that on a regular basis says that outlandish shit for those same reasons. And so, man, that would be a power play. It'd be a risky power play. You and I would not recommend that. We would think, now, if you knew on the horizon, though, that you knew what story was possible to come out on Thursday of this week, and you're like, we got to get something bigger than that will dominate the headlines, and then you sort of conspire that way, put something out a little bit bigger.
Yeah, I mean, we say you and I would think that this was a bad call, but was it compared to something else that may be brewing?
On the other side of it, people that didn't even know who Tony was now know. So he is at 100%. He's going to have the same show. He's going to have the same followings because that's his brand. Nobody in his current fan base have changed anything. But do you think now he's going to get a ton? So I can just see. I don't have a Donald Trump impression. I really don't.
Oh,
but
please,
Donald Trump sits down and
says,
Donald Trump says, "Listen, I got something huge for you." Huge for you.
It's huge. It's going to be bigger. It's going to be bigger
it's
than
the
anything
biggest audience
we've ever
you're ever
done before.
Gonna get.
Listen,
you're going to take flack for a week. You're going to do me a big favor. That's terrible.
Listen, you're going to be great. You're going to be famous, and then I'll pardon you. And this is going to be huge. It's going to be amazing. I'll give you a seat on my cabinet. It's going to be great. Because we can't let Kamala get the story ahead of us. We've got to go ahead and we got to be pro. We got to work this out. A lot of people are going to love this.
That was really good. Kelin, yours is way better than mine.
Yep, I totally think that's what this was now. Because, I mean, what did they say? Cliche. The only bad publicity is no publicity.
Yep.
That's got to be it.
How else would they be
that dumb?
They're not. They're not that dumb.
They know exactly what they're doing. That's what this is.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And now we just wait and see what was the story that this was going to cover up.
Because now you think like October surprises, you want to release a story that there's not enough time for you to shoot down, right? Mm-hmm. And so you look at it, voting's Tuesday. A lot of people have voted already and early and whatever, but really the in-person people is who you're going after. Would you release it on Thursday, right, when somebody has all weekend to combat it? Or would you release it on Monday, where it's right before voting, there's not enough of a news cycle to be able to respond to it? So I'm thinking Monday was the day, right? That was the day. And so this may push it up so that we short circuit the Tony Hinchcliffe, and maybe today or tomorrow is going to be that big story. Because it doesn't help you to not release a story at all. So you're going to do it, but you might do it sooner to eclipse what Tony Hinchcliffe did during that rally.
Yeah, because really, the people I think that are going to hate on him the most were the people that were already decided.
Yep.
They were already decided. Who cares if you get more verbalization of the hate for one person? You're going to anyways.
Yeah.
So why not distract from something else with it? Why not use it to gain something else?
It's genius. I'm telling you, even though it was a big risk, I wouldn't have done it. I wouldn't have had the balls to do it. But I think that was the play.
Yeah. I swear I saw some video that was like, they tried to say it was Trump almost backpedaling, like, well, I didn't even really know who he was when he came up here, and blah, blah, blah. I wonder if it could be like to paint Trump in a better light. Does Trump now come out and publicly say what he said was wrong? This is terrible. I think
they already did that. I think he came out and said that he was just the opening act, and he doesn't, speak for the campaign. Which, of course, in that same strategy, I would totally do that. You insulate yourself from direct, conspiracy. But
because I saw a video, it was a news story, and news is biased, so take it or leave it. They said that, Trump's people did look at the jokes and the material beforehand and okayed it. They said they actually struck one joke because he called Harris the C word. And they said, no, too far, take that out. But other than that, they saw everything else and they let him do it.
I heard that women voters don't like that word for some reason. Is that a...
Again, it's frowned upon,
yeah?
I think. I wouldn't use it. I've never personally, again, intent is big with me. To just simply use that word in a story or talking about something, or just to use the word, I don't care.
See, I don't put you in the minority, though. You're reasonable and intelligent, and so you're not part of the group that would be effective at insulting, right?
Yeah,
people are unreasonable, and I throw that grenade in your direction, I get the response that I need. And you would put it through your filters and look at context and how it was intended, and then you might diffuse the grenade on your own.
Yeah, directly saying you are a whatever is far different than just dropping the word.
But there are people, right, that are waiting for somebody to say that word, and they will ambush the shit out of you regardless of context, because they've been planning what they're going to say in response to that word since they were little people.
Yeah.
Is little people a word that maybe I just offended a group? You're going to say context.
Young people.
Young people. That's the way it was.
Younger people. Yeah, and I think everybody is just in this super heightened state right now, too, where typically maybe somebody would have more sense about them had it not be so many days into a very heated election. And
are you saying we get irrational and stupider nearing an election?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I'll agree with you. I'll agree with that.
Yeah. So, I mean, they're kind of banking on people to be a little more explosive about something, and
depending on it, not just banking on it,
yeah,
depending on the strategy of playing cultural against itself. It's 5D chess.
Yeah. I mean, I bet Diddy loves Tony Hinchcliffe right about now. He's like, good. Got the
You're
news
the
off
bigger
of
dick
me.
than me.
He's like, now no one's looking at my 50 bottles of baby oil, whatever the heck it was. Was it baby oil? It was baby oil. Supposedly.
That's the concerning part, is the baby oil?
I was going to say, was it baby oil or was it KY? It was baby oil.
It was baby oil.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think they went to Costco and bought a whole pallet of baby oil.
I mean, maybe they're just doomsday preppers.
And they need their
goes with the rice.
I will tell you, during my preparation, baby oil was never on the list.
Really?
Really.
All right.